I think it's very, very worrisome that the arts continue to be the one area in society where we are still lagging in terms of true progress towards a fairer society, which is what we had before this madness started.
Well, I think it would be helpful for us to just point out that there is a role and room for compassion. Obviously, at the end of the day, in order for us to all move forward as a society and to achieve some kind of unity as we move forward, is to get on the same page, and that will require acknowledging why some of these abuses, some of these excesses have occurred in the first place. And of course, at the end of the day, as human beings, we're social creatures, and so we all want to feel included. We all want to feel that we have a seat at the table, so to speak. And so really, we do need to have additional frank discussions about, the best way to go about that. And I think if all of us search deep within ourselves, we'll realize that you can only truly feel good about an achievement that you've made. That really, if you feel that achievement is an authentic one, that the place that you hold in society is that it's the perfect fit,
and that you've earned it.
That you've earned that place, and that it's a good fit. And so if we were to ever try to contrive the roster of different sports teams to accurately reflect the demographics of the country, I don't think that any of the athletes involved, regardless of their backgrounds, would feel good about the result of that.
Right.
And I think we can say the same thing and apply the same logic to other disciplines.
Correct.
And, if somebody of a certain demographic feels that, they're underrepresented in the arts, then that's just that much more of an incentive to buckle down and to be disciplined enough to earn their place, that spot, and to feel so good about that.
Right.
That's really the only way forward.
Right.
That we can celebrate greatness and merit and refinement to the greatest extent possible.
Correct. And again, you mentioned an example that I always use. You mentioned the sports, right? It makes as much sense to put a mediocre singer on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera just because they happen to be underrepresented, and it does as big a disservice both to the singer and to the audiences as it would make a disservice to the audience, to the public, or to me, to put me on a basketball court competing in the NBA for the sake of having people who are challenged vertically, like myself, more represented on the NBA.
I appreciate your pragmatic humility on that, but
right,
yeah,
but
I would much rather pay to watch you sing opera than to try to dunk a basketball.
Exactly. So we should have the best of the best performing, regardless of their background.
Right. It needs to be demographically agnostic. Should not be part of the equation. Exactly. We do want to expose all of the population to the wonders of all of the disciplines that constitute our society, all of the sciences, all of the arts. But at the end of the day, those opportunities and those exposures need to evolve naturally on their own, and then the results will be what they are.
Will speak for themselves as well.
As a society, we just, I think, need to focus on excellence and merit first and foremost. That's part of really this realignment that I think is so desperately needed.
Right.
And as you mentioned, the art space has been, I guess, a little bit of a lagging field in this respect, because I think the arts is an inherently emotive sphere of life. And so that instinct, that desire that I spoke of earlier to be inclusive and for everyone to feel like they're part of something is even more salient in the arts. But nevertheless, the importance, the critical role that excellence, refinement, and standards and merit play cannot be overstated, even in something, an emotional realm like the arts. And so this is something that I know you and I feel passionately about. And just as the educational institutions, just as some of the corporate entities around the country have been subjected to some kind of scrutiny and have been encouraged to move in a more merit-based direction, I think also we have a wonderful opportunity now to apply the same principles to the arts.
This is precisely what this other article I mentioned earlier, that two articles that represent the two opposing views of our culture wars appear today. One was the article that I cited already by Alex Ross in the New Yorker, sorry. And now I want to talk a little bit about this article that appeared today on the New Criterion. This article was authored, and this is also quite telling, by an author who would not reveal his actual name, perhaps for fear of, or not perhaps,
was a pseudonym?
For fear of repercussions. He published it under a pseudonym, Don Baton, right?
Oh, okay.
Don Baton. So we have on the New Criterion an article by Don Baton, a man who's right on the money, but unfortunately not willing to share his actual name, saying that the goal that we are all pursuing is, celebrate our love for Western and American musical traditions, to bring new audiences into the concert halls and to keep them coming back. And he sees the move by President Trump in connection to the Kennedy Center as a cause for celebration and a very important message in the right direction, but then brings up the pushback that it is already facing, and of course it brings up a couple of examples of the institutions that are preventing the creators in the arts from going back into these system of merit of yore. The two institutions that he specifically talks about are the League of American Orchestras and Opera America. These two institutions are pushing the DEI agenda very, very strongly and are literally keeping tabs of the numbers of diverse creators and performers within these institutions, and basically publicly shaming and trying to coerce all other institutions into adopting these racial and sex orientation or sex identity quotas, as though
gender identity,
right? As though any of these meta-artistic features of a human person had any bearing on their ability to produce art. Like we keep saying, the fact that I am Mexican ethnically, right, and although I'm also a German citizen, doesn't have any bearing on my ability to sing or not sing XYZ repertoire. or to have technical competence over my instrument. The fact that I am a man doesn't make me doesn't give me a particular advantage over singing coloratura over a woman. The fact that I am gay doesn't make my German diction any better. It's the fact that I'm a German citizen who actually speaks the language and has put a lot of time into learning how to sing in proper German, what makes my German good, right? So it really baffles me that these institutions are doubling down on their efforts to discriminate against suitable candidates on the basis of these completely irrelevant categories.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that Don Baton has makes a very good and compelling point in that what Trump did by electing a new board for Kennedy Center, which then chose him as chairman.
They were appointed, and then
they chose him as chairman. The leftist narrative right now is that he appointed himself chairman. That's not how it happened. He first appointed a new board, and then that new board decided to appoint him chairman. It's a step in the right direction because it's telling other artistic institutions that President Trump cares about the arts.
Right.
And he cares so much about the arts, actually, that he made it a point to have classically trained singers be part of his inauguration.
Absolutely.
Rather than some rapper or some hip-hop artist or something else, right? Which would have been less dignified for that historic event. And also, even though he named Ambassador Grenell as director of the Kennedy Center, interim, and people are saying, well, Grenell is not a person of the arts. They're missing the point that Grenell is an incredibly experienced politician with a trove of international experience, having been ambassador to Germany for the U.S. and having held many other positions in politics and being a man of both intelligence and integrity. What is your take on this particular topic of the Kennedy Center and the role that the MAGA movement and the president may have in realigning the arts, both from the Kennedy Center as a symbol for the rest of the world and also from the National Endowment of the Arts?
Well, first of all, I just think it's wonderful that President Trump is now directly involved in an iconic cultural institution like the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. I'm very grateful as a citizen that he's taken on this responsibility, this role, especially when there are so many additional pressing matters that he has to lend his attention to on a daily basis. So very grateful for that. And I do believe that it's a wonderful opportunity to reinvigorate this institution in our nation's capital, to realign it with values, like you said, that focus on merit, where artists in all disciplines, regardless of their demographics or what groups they identify with, can feel confident that their presence on that stage is strictly a function and a reflection of their talents and their merits and not any other arbitrary, contrived criteria. And so I think going forward, all the artists that are privileged to grace that stage will really have reason to hold their heads high and to know confidently that they do indeed, by virtue of their presence, represent the very best in their respective disciplines. And as you alluded to, it will hopefully serve as a compelling template for the other artistic institutions around the country from coast to coast to follow. And as I was alluding to earlier with respect to corporations and educational institutions, it is true that there will be levers available to the executive branch, whether through the Justice Department or other bodies, other agencies, that will be able to provide some incentive, both financial and legal, to those artistic institutions to take a good hard look at themselves and to protect their endowments by recalibrating their values, both explicitly in their charters and in the values that are implicit in their programming decisions and their hiring decisions and so forth. And I think it would really behoove them to embrace this opportunity that is presented now to really get back to the business of making the best art possible. And I strongly encourage all of these institutions to get on board with that and embrace that and be a part of the resurgence of our culture and really what will be a new golden age of culture in the United States.
Of course, this all takes a lot of money. And this is where perhaps I coming from Germany and coming from Europe, which is where I spent the vast majority of my adult life, I am a firm believer in the need for a three-pronged approach to funding the arts, because of course all these efforts require incredible amounts of money. I commonly face resistance from within the conservative movements in which you and I find ourselves, with people saying, well, the arts, first of all, they're not a priority, and secondly, the free market should take care of funding them. I always make the remark in response to these two statements that, first of all, the arts are a priority because the vast majority of Americans get their social and moral values and mores determined by the content that they consume from the arts and entertainment industries. That's number one. And number two, I don't believe that the free market will fix anything, because if anything, the free market is interested in maximizing profit, and there is nothing more profitable than pandering to the lowest common denominator. And this is exactly what we have seen over the last 20 years. If 20 years ago, when I studied here in the US and did my master's and my doctorate at Indiana University, you had told me that we would get to the point where a song called Wet Ass P-U-S-S-I-Y would be the largest grossing and most important and most heard song of the year
on NPR.
And on NPR, I would have laughed and I would have been appalled, obviously, but I would have thought it absolutely inconceivable. And yet here we are. And it does seem like that's just one step in the race downward, right? So we need to increase funding for the arts, definitely, but it cannot be left only to the federal government or the state and local governments. Now, if you look, and we did this exercise where we looked at the budget actually for the arts in this country, and we compared it to other countries. That in the fiscal year 2023, which is the latest that we have, the aggregate federal, state, and local funding for the arts totaled $2.28 billion. And that might sound like a lot of money, but actually that represents only $6.83 per person, per capita, in this country of 320 plus million people.
Right.
So I wonder, in what parallel universe does it make sense to invest the price of a venti latte Starbucks per year per person in the arts? It makes absolutely no sense. And cutting further makes even less sense, right? Now, if we compare this investment with the investment of our main cultural competitors in Europe, countries such as France, Germany, and Russia, you see how dire the situation is. France invests 1,832% more than the USA does. Germany 295%, and Russia 144%. And these are not even the greatest competitors. The real investors in culture in Europe are Estonia, which invests 4,021% more
Wow.
in culture per capita. Latvia, which invests 3,431% more, and 2,522% more that Hungary invests in culture.
Wow.
Their investment in culture dwarfs ours.
Wow.
In this country. How is it possible that still the leading country in the world in terms of cultural dominance invests so little of its federal, state, and local budget into the arts? It makes no sense.
Well, I think that, again, we have an opportunity to make the case that you can look at this through the lens of the results of these investments having different metrics. In the business world, the metric, of course, is at the bottom, the proverbial bottom line on a spreadsheet. You invest X amount of dollars, and at the end of the process, you have a net profit of X. And in the arts, it's always been understood implicitly by most societies that the output, the results, the dividends are realizable, but they are realizable and quantifiable in different forms. And in this case, one of the most important results yielded by these investments that are made by a capitalistic society in the arts are the values that are sustained and nurtured and transmitted to the entire population, and most importantly, to the young, to the youth, the next generation to follow. And, as we are, again, at a crossroads in how we evaluate our place in the world, and in particular Europe, this new administration has taken a really sober and objective look at some of the dispositions of various European countries. And it seems pretty clear to a lot of folks, and I count myself among them, that some of the Eastern European countries are particularly good and adept at safeguarding some of these traditional morals and values that, again, have sustained our societies for so very long. And you see a high correlation between the societies that make the largest investments in arts and culture and the demonstrated capacity and result of the transmission of those values in the outcomes. You look on the streets of Hungary or the streets of other European capitals,
Moscow,
and you're not seeing. I was going to leave that one out for the time being. Maybe next year we could talk about that. But yeah, all of these Eastern European capitals are much less likely to manifest some of the concerning dynamics and phenomena that we observe on the streets of, especially, Democrat-run cities in the United States.
New York, Chicago, etc. Compare them to Warsaw.
So even if you are a capitalist, I think rather than forfeit the cultural space and therefore forfeit the opportunity to shape the hearts and minds of the next generation of citizens and indeed voters, as Andrew Breitbart admonished us, I think even the most hard-nosed capitalist should take a good, hard look at the differently quantifiable but very, very real and tangible results that can be obtained by making substantial and sustained and deliberate investments in our bedrock arts and cultural institutions, and making sure that he who pays the piper calls the tune ethos is manifest, in all of those different bodies and institutions in a way that furthers our agenda.
And to this end, I want to make a couple of comments. First of all, not all the return on investment is intangible. There is actually a tangible economic return.
Of course,
and European studies have proven this. There was a particular study, for example, that was carried out in the city of Lyon in France that demonstrated that for every euro of subsidies given by the state by the government to the Opera House of Lyon, 2.4 euros came back
Right.
in terms of economic growth and economic impact in the fields of services, restaurants, hotels,
Right.
tourism. All
There's a
these things.
hard multiplier as well.
Absolutely, and I would also make the point that I made in my conversation previously on one of my episodes with my friend and much admired conservative thinker par excellence, Heather McDonald, who is skeptical about funding the arts during the Trump administration because she says, well, we don't want to create the conditions that may lead to Democrats then taking this funding in the future when they regain power and continue their propaganda, which continues to be the only issue that she and I have ever disagreed on. I think that investing in the arts is something that we have to do, A, because, as I said, it is economically solid, B, because it is socially and culturally necessary, but also because it's the right thing to do per se. And any fear that something that we are creating might benefit our enemy, whether it be political or otherwise, is short-sighted. We don't stop ourselves from creating from developing a total cure for cancer just because it might land also on the hands of and benefit the members of Hamas, or we don't stop ourselves from creating a definitive cure for HIV just because it might end up in the hands of North Korea. We do it because it's necessary and it's good for our society and for the common good. And for this very same reason, we should do it also because it's for the common good of all Americans that the arts be heading in the right direction. And just let me finish my comment. The issue too is that the Democrats were already proselytizing with money that was being given to the arts, and they had completely weaponized the arts and turned them into instruments of political propaganda. Now, I recently had a conversation with another mutual friend of ours, Brent Morden from FAIR in the Arts, and he said, I want nothing. I want the arts to have nothing to do with politics. All I want is a return to merit, beauty, and excellence. And I said, well, that very utterance is already a political utterance, and that very utterance is the bedrock of the policy that the Trump administration seems to want to pursue, and if at any rate, should be pursuing. So, in your opinion, what do you think about what I just said? And in your opinion, can the arts be divorced from politics?
Well, as it stands right now, returning to a common sense framework is currently a political issue, even though in the larger, meta view need not be a political issue, So the way I would put it is we, again, have an opportunity to invite people across the spectrum to not necessarily get on board with, specific policy points that relate to, whether it's MAGA or whatever. There are issues, MAGA is not so much, President Trump likes to say it's not hardcore right wing. MAGA represents common sense. And common sense, as it has been understood for so very long, hundreds of years, encompasses, both practical Democrats, practical Republicans. And so the beautiful part of this is once you have corrected the extremism, and once you have corrected this these forces that undermine common sense, then these shared values rise to the surface. our implicit, natural, God-given appreciation for aesthetic beauty and refinement, and our natural response to art and content that ennobles ourselves, our countrymen, and the human condition itself. Our appreciation for these things is natural. It's an innate. We're born with it. And so I think that if we make the proper investments and we realign these institutions to embrace this kind of common sense pragmatism, then that itself will safeguard against the changing political winds having an inordinate impact on the arts and on the investments that were made during this time. And so hopefully concerns, very valid and understandable concerns of people like Heather McDonald, can be addressed in this way, that we can create the framework where common sense will survive past, over and above the political vicissitudes of the day.
Right. You mentioned that that President Trump insists that MAGA is a common sense movement, but what it also really is, it is a truly democratic movement. The left, the political left and the media love to smear us, and particularly, obviously, President Trump and his cabinet as populists. But I posit, what is populism if not democracy? At the end of the day, right, what is populism and what is democracy? Democracy is government by the majority for the majority. And unfortunately, during the Obama and Biden administrations, what we actually saw was a government by elites for elites.
Correct.
And this is what actually alienated millions of people who felt left behind, excluded in spite of all the inclusivity that they talked about, and who then voted en masse for Trump.
Well, what's funny is that the only people who regard the term populist as an insult are these elites.
Right.
And basically, we're returning to these common sense values now, that whether you're an old school blue dog Democrat that we used to have in this country, or you're an old school Republican, you want to get things done, and you want common sense to be the order of the day, and you want to really respond to these old American values that always bound us all together. And we really do have an opportunity to get back to that. And we're really blessed for this moment in history, this moment in time. And it's now our prerogative to embrace it.
Yeah, I think so too. To end our discussion today, our conversation today, I will say that to me, President Trump is much more than just obviously an individual. He's way greater than that. He's not a businessman. He's not a politician. He's not even a president. What President Trump represents is actually a zeitgeist. We are living in the Trump era, and the Trump era is not so much the victory of Trump and the Republicans. The Trump era is a repudiation of all the excesses of the woke left. This is what he represents, and this is why he's so popular, not just in the U.S., but across the world, because the entire world is sick and tired of the dogmatism and the excesses and the absolutely cringe-worthy upheaval of anti-values that the political left has embraced both in the U.S. and in Western Europe. And
the great irony is that progressivism can be maligned as a dumbing down of things, when in fact what you and I are arguing for is precisely investments in the opposite direction, investments in elevation sublimity, nobility, and refinement.
Correct.
And that's really the great irony, is that the common man wants the very best for himself, for his family, and for his country.
Right.
And I think in many ways, President Trump, at least in spirit, has that common man, common sense aspiration
Right.
for the very best in life for himself, for his family, and for his country. And so I think we're all blessed to have somebody with that spirit and that mindset leading the nation and the world in this beautiful new direction.
Well, on that note, I thank you for having been here tonight with us. I hope that you and I will be able to contribute to the greatness of this country. Now that Europe seems to be determined to commit cultural suicide, it is incumbent upon
we haven't
US
given up just yet.
to lead the way.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that this is the last repository of the greatness of Western civilization. So again, thank you very much for being here tonight. It's a great pleasure for me. And thank you, everybody, for watching.